dreams that you dream of, dreams really do come true. Ooh, someday you wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind. Be where trouble melts like lemon drops, high above the chimney top. That's where you find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow. Bluebirds fly, and the dream that you dare to, oh why can't oh, someday I wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind. Be where trouble melts like a lemon drops, high above the chimney top. That's where you find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow, way up high. The dreams that you dare to, why, oh why can't I?
All right. Well, welcome everyone. I just love Israel too. It's just so gentle, beautiful soul, and he's since passed on, but what a lovely, talented musician. Well, welcome you all, and we are about to get started. Got some people to admit there. And everyone can hear me okay, right? Great to see you all. All right, so we're gonna do something a little bit different today. And so this is workshop part 2. You all are busily working on your system performance measures, and we are your technical assistance team, the Racial Equity Action Lab. I'm here to support you all with coming up with racial equity and social equity goals. So we're gonna do a bit of community grounding. Rajni is going to remind us of our purpose, and then John is gonna do a mini workshop on adaptive versus technical leadership, which is really, really good. And then we're gonna take a deep dive into system performance measures 4, 5, and 6, and give you some really good examples of potential goals that really use that SMARTY framework that we talk about, you know, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound, inclusive, and equitable. And then the rest of our session will be for questions and comments, and then some logistics on the next office hours coming up. All right. So for our check-in, I want to do something different. So in the chat, type your childhood nickname and your personal weather status for today. We want to see how everyone's doing. So what's your personal weather status? Are you feeling partly cloudy with possible sunshine? Are you feeling rainy and thunderstorms? Is there a hurricane about to come? Or are you just having kind of a foggy gray day? But what is your personal weather status? We want to get kind of a consensus and see how people are doing. So if you could put in the chat your childhood nickname, if you want to share, and your personal weather status. And I'll start. So my childhood nickname, I had several. Monty, short for Lamont. And then, I don't know if you guys remember the restaurant Shoney's. There was this restaurant chain called Shoney's. And in front of the restaurant, they had this great big chubby boy, and he was called the Big Boy. And I was always this really big chubby kid with huge cheeks. So my cousins used to tease me and call me Big Boy. So my childhood nicknames were Monty and Big Boy. So in the chat, let's see what you all have. Oh, my personal weather status today, you know, I'm going back home to South Carolina for a visit. I'm in DC for the National Coalition of Homeless Veterans Conference. So I'm feeling really humid and muggy, but sunny. Emmy, and thank you, Emily, partly sunny and cloudy. Nice. Loha, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Loha. And Loha is feeling, pending tsunami. I feel you. Oh, time-sensitive projects. Yes. Poopadoop. Oh, I love that, Christy. Breezy at 85 degrees. Kimberly says orange and bright and sunny. Nice. Miguelito? Miguel, who can pronounce that for me?
Miguelito.
Miguelito.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. Oh, nice. Let's see what other ones we got. Loha, Lori, and Lori, oh, that's right, with the tsunami. And Skippy, like the peanut butter. Noah, Skippy. Stormy with humidity that's off the charts, but a chance of clear skies tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow is Friday. I hear you there. Nice. What are some other nicknames we got? Lord Rich. Wow. That's a very, very commanding one. Sunny, cloudy, 82 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh, Monique, I love your nickname, Cornbread. Cloudy with the sun peeking through. Yes, for cornbread. Other people are loving that one too. Donald said, Whitehead was his nickname at school. His Navy nickname was Mad Dog. Oh, you were a boxer. All right. And personal weather status is cloudy but clearing. Yes. Now, thank y'all for sharing. It's always fun to see our nicknames and bring up those childhood memories, right? So this next slide is your coaching team, your wonderful, beautiful coaching team. Just an enormous partnership between TAC, APT Associates, the National Coalition for the Homeless, C4 Innovations, Racial Equity Partners, Gilvar Consulting, and Pain to Purpose. So we have a wonderful team. Now, something that you all should know, coaches are going to be reaching out to you all. So there's 110 HAP grantees. I know some of you all are combining your applications, but we want to ensure that all 100% of you all cross the finish line in getting your racial equity goals. So a coach is going to reach out to your community just for a check-in and say, hey, where are you at? Do you need some support? Do you know the office hours are here? Do you have the recordings? Are you going to need some one-on-one assistance? But they just want to know really where you're at. So it's really, if you guys need more assistance, they'll take note of that. And if you need more data assistance, they might connect you with one of our coaches with APT. If you need, if your goal is around lived expertise, they might connect you with the National Coalition for the Homelessness. And so we got a lot of people that are bringing a lot of different skill sets. And if you're good and you're like, no, we're on track, we're fine, they'll note that in our tracker and they won't bother you, okay? So please watch your emails because someone's gonna be reaching out to you just to kind of be that, your point of contact and to make sure that you all are on track and really meeting you all where you're at. Awesome. All right, so let's go to the next slide. I'm going to turn it over to the lovely Dr. Rajni.
Thank you so much, Monty. I love it. What a wonderful way to start today and just so energized to be in community, to be together, focused on this important work. So thank you all for being here. This is our grounding image that we continue to visit and revisit with intention. So as we look at this, we again see how our work is collectively focused on moving from inequality to equality, understanding we have to have equity to have equality, but of course, really being rooted and focused on advancing justice, fixing the systems to offer equal access and opportunities so everyone can not only survive, but thrive in our world. And here we have our 5 steps for targeted universalism. This is our framework that we are using as we do this work. So again, just a reminder that while we have several different pieces and components of this rich framework. Last time we met, we watched a video that gave us more insight. You can also go back and revisit that in the slides as well. But remember, right now, we are focused where you see that yellow bar saying creating trackable data, goals based on disparities identified. That is where we are focused right now. We're going to move through all the pieces of the framework. But again, right now, we are focused as a collective, right where you see that arrow.
Hey.
I'm going to turn it over to John.
Great. Hi, everybody. John Gilvar. Really delighted to be here again. And nice to hear all those great nicknames in the chat. Mine was in high school was Sticks, because I had played soccer and I had the skinniest legs ever. So there you go. So what I'd like to just talk about for a few minutes is a sort of a different approach to leadership than a lot of us are sort of trained in, especially when we work for big organizations, government organizations, or big nonprofits and so forth. We tend to lean a lot on technical solutions and technical expertise. And really this process of going through the 5 steps toward racial equity and social equity in housing, and also housing justice, requires a different approach from our normal approach. It requires what a team from Harvard has developed a model called adaptive leadership, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But it really looks at who are the true experts and how are we going about, what's our process for making sure that the people closest to the problem we're recognizing that the people closest to the problem are closest to the solution, and we're really including them. What the authors, it's Alexander Grashow, Marty Linsky, and Ronald Heifetz, what they talk about in their books on adaptive leadership is getting the executive leadership, the technical leaders up. They call it going up on the balcony and looking down at the dance floor, but to do it with the people who are most impacted by the problem, doing it together. And then what that entails is it's a new model of leadership. It's looking at the right data, so that we're talking about this process that you're in right now of disaggregating data and looking at where there's disparities, where are the inequities showing up in the data when you look at different populations separately in terms of the length of time homeless, the early exits back into homelessness after housing placement, the time it takes to go from the intake into coordinated entry into housing placement, all of those inequities, which might be by race, it might be gender issues, et cetera, et cetera. So looking at the right data, and then when you look at the right data and you have the right people present and you're sharing the responsibility for really digging into that data, then you're going to be able to dig deeply into the why, into the root causes, and create strategies that address those root causes. Okay, so we go to the next slide, please. So again, in this model, we look at the differences between technical and adaptive challenges and technical and adaptive leadership. This slide really, I developed this slide with some colleagues when I was working in King County as the administrator for the Healthcare for the Homeless Network. And, we really often within county government, we would find ourselves searching for technical answers. And certainly a lot of times the political pressure is on quick fixes, technical solutions. They want to know what the experts think. They oftentimes people would ask us, well, what works well in this city or that city? We heard, like, sometimes a city council member would come back or a county council member and say, oh, we heard that they have this all worked out in San Francisco. Can you just go down to San Francisco and see what they're doing and bring it back? And really that's an orientation towards these technical fixes, when in fact, that's not really what's going to help with when you're dealing with systemic issues and racism that is built in, that has been for generations built into all of these different systems, so that really it's not a question of technical solution. So on the left, you'll see technical solutions are easy to identify. Adaptive challenges, or sorry, technical challenges are easy to identify. Adaptive challenges are not so easy to identify, and in fact, easy to deny. And we can see that when we talk about systemic racism. Then technical challenge often lend themselves to cut and dried solutions, whereas adaptive challenges require changes in values, beliefs, roles, relationships, and approaches to work. And we can see you're engaged in that right now, and we're available to kind of walk with you through that process, as Lamont was saying before. On the left, technical challenges often can be solved by an authority or an expert. And then on the right, adaptive challenges, people with the problem need to do the work of solving it. Who's most impacted by these disparities that you're finding in your data? And how do you include them in coming up with your metrics to I know that some of these outcome measures are due June 30th, so the clock's running, but after June 30th, as we're going to go through, you're going to dive more deeply into going through these stages of targeted universalism to get to strategic solutions, strategic or effective strategies for addressing root causes. So that'll be critical that you have the people with the problem at the table with you. And then requiring change in just one or a few places, often contained within organizational boundaries, is more on the technical side. And on the adaptive side, change is required in numerous places, usually across organizational boundaries. And then again, technical people are generally receptive to technical solution. Hey, it sounds good. We got it fixed quickly, neatly, et cetera. But often with adaptive challenges, people are resistant to even acknowledging the challenge, let alone really rolling up their sleeves to look at root causes together. And then on the technical side, solutions can be implemented quickly, even by edict. And then on the adaptive side, solutions, in quotes, require experiments and new discoveries. They take a long time to implement, and they cannot be implemented by edict, right? They're implemented collectively and through power sharing. So if we could go to the next slide. And we'll have time for questions about this, but I want to turn it back to Rajni and get to some of our examples.
Thank you so much, John. Yes, and as we do this work, really thinking about racial and social equity using our SMARTY goals, I just want us to pause as a community and recognize today in history, right, is actually when the American Indian Citizenship Congress passed the Citizenship Act. And so for many indigenous communities and tribes around our nation today, they celebrate having the right to vote, to hold public office, all of these things. But of course, it's juxtaposed with the pain of knowing how much was taken, right? And we see these disparities, the awful pain and anguish from history that continues to live. And so a lot of this work, as we are doing this work, we are working intentionally to advance equity, to advance racial equity, knowing the connections to economic justice as well. So here, we just want to remind everybody that again, this section that we are focused on now here, co-creating these SPM outcome goals, including really thinking about best practice, people living, who have experienced homelessness, both currently or past experience, really making sure that we are allowing agency to really move the work that we're doing, including people from historically marginalized communities, making sure that we have direct service providers of color. Diversity representation matters, and we have to be really active to, again, mitigate so many of the oppressive systems that continue to operate in our world. So again, as we're working on this, June 30th is our goal, and that is really what we're focused on again here today as we talk in workshop session 2. Now, just as you see below in the bottom half of this slide, when we fast forward after June 30th, we're going to be continuing to dig even deeper into this work. We're going to analyze the disaggregated data together, identify and understand persistent drivers of disparities. You know, what are those systemic level barriers to justice? And we're going to make sure that we are integrating the point of view of people most impacted by disparities. We're going to collaborate in co-creating targeted strategies to remove barriers. So again, all of this critical work, and I know many communities are really kind of eager to dive in, and we are here to coach and to dive in with you. So just know that lots of support here you have in this space. We are all co-conspirators towards justice in this work. And there's a lot of work to be done. And sometimes, you know, it is overwhelming to think about all of the work, to even know where do we start. But again, this process is hopefully going to allow us to dig deeply and to have real sustainable impact. So again, the link, you can find it in the slides. Nastasia will be sharing these slides with everyone, I'm sure, afterwards, so you all can have a reference in the recording as well. But the link to the template is there. And right now, again, just to remind everyone, the entire kind of template is not due yet. Right now, all that is due by June 30th is those goals that we are working on, those SPM goals. Today, we're gonna really jump in. You're gonna get to see more examples. As we do this work, you know, a lot of this work, and even just thinking about all that is going on in our world today, the many fractures that we have, it can be quite daunting. And I just want to remind all of us as we continue to do this work, the words of Desmond Tutu, who reminded us, do your little bit of good where you are. It's those little bits of good put together that overwhelm the world. And I think we're all doing that good work, that good trouble. So let's continue. So here is just a reminder, those of you who were with us during phase 1 will remember the Smarty approach that we talked about and actively started to jump in and use. So for those communities who are new joining us, we just want to remind everyone that we highly recommend thinking about these goals as we craft them through the Smarty lens, asking ourselves, is the goal specific? Is it measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound? And the I and E are essential here. Is it inclusive? And is it equitable? The I and E are really, really important. Many times the SMART approach is used and the IE is missing. We are intentionally focusing on that IE. So if you look here, you'll see an example, and everybody can have this as reference to go back to as well. You see, you know, we have a draft goal that was kind of initially drafted. Engage persons with lived experience and expertise in the Coordinated Entry Leadership Committee by fall 2022. Beautiful intention, ideas, but we need to move that into Smarty. So thinking about that a little deeper, you can see that if we were to redo that, the second draft got better, right? We started to add in by August 2022, we will engage racially and ethnically diverse persons with lived experience and expertise by creating paid positions on the Coordinated Entry Leadership Committee. In this draft, you start to see a focus or movement towards the inclusive, racially and ethnically diverse, and towards the equitable, paid positions. But still, we can do better. And so collectively pushing into the third, what you'll see is we start to be even more specific. When we say we're going to engage racially and ethnically diverse persons with lived experience, what communities, based on our data, based on disparities, are we focusing in on? Now, one question I know some communities have had is, we have so many disparities. You know, how do we know what group do we start with? It feels almost unfair because everybody needs the support and help based on the oppressive nature of what is being experienced. And so one way, there are many ways communities come about this work. And I know John is going to talk a little more about this with the SPM goals. But again, going back to your data to see if you have glaring significant disparities that may be higher in one group. So this session, we started out with the beautiful song Over the Rainbow by Israel. Knowing Native Hawaiian, knowing Pacific Islanders experience homelessness 9 times higher rates, especially in certain communities in California. If you see that in your data, you want to focus in on that, be specific. And then here you also see that as we say, we're going to create, persons with lived experience and expertise paid positions. Here's an opportunity for us to go into the measurable, right? How many, is there a specific quantity that we could add there? How many paid positions, right? What does that look like? That specificity enables us to actually move into our impact zone. So finally, you see the revised goal in blue that is written, taking that from the first draft goal all the way to the final revised goal, which incorporates a SMARTY lens. So again, this is just one example, and this is the kind of work we're going to do together and that coaches are going to support everyone with as well. That's why we're here, right? To ask those critical questions, to push deeper, to help each other in this work. And then finally, I'll just point out again, here is a piece of art, beautiful art, Celebrate Freedom by Larry Poncho Brown. And again, as we focus on this work, let us remember this is about shared humanity, liberation, and love.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dr. Rajni Shankar Brown. You all see why we love Rajni. You can tell that she is an educator. And this is so helpful. And hopefully you all will be able to revisit the recording, visit the slide, because it really articulates the SMARTY piece well. So let's continue to move deeper, and we're going to turn it over to Mr. John Gilvar as we begin to go through some of our examples.
Great, thanks, Lamont. So we're going to get really concrete now with examples that track the different system performance measures that you're working with. The last workshop, workshop 1, which you should have or will receive a link to a recording of, dealt with the first 3 system performance measures, 1, 2, and 3. This time we're doing 4, 5, and 6. And we're going to go through with hypothetical scenarios from COCs that we that represent a sort of like, we drew from different ones to create composites. So let's just jump in, but we're going to get really specific with how to use SMARTY goals in this process of moving through the 5 steps of targeted universalism. So you'll see this system performance measure number 4 is reducing the length of time persons remain homeless. We're going to start with looking at the universal goal, the established universal goal for this COC. We'll just call it COC-A. And we see that goal is reduce the average elapsed time from coordinated entry intake to housing placement by 2 months. Let's shave 2 months off the elapsed time. That's the goal for the entire COC, for the whole population that is served by the COC. Okay, then the second step is to assess the performance relative to the universal goal. And this COC found, looking at that universal goal, that the average elapsed time from coordinated entry intake to housing placement has decreased by 1 month. So progress, right? They're measuring their progress on their universal goal. Now we're going to get in the yellow section, you can see there with the bolded text, we're going to get to the part that you're in right now, that the part that's due June 30th. And the first step is identify the differences in performance by population. So the differences in performance against that universal goal by different populations. And what this COC found was, on average, it takes 3.25 times longer to place trans youth of color into permanent housing than the average for all populations, right? So trans youth of color are moving through the system much more slowly than the average sort of for the entire population, which is where you're measuring progress against your or success against your universal goal. So then the question is, okay, well, what's a trackable goal based on that disparity that we can come up with? And this is, again, what's due by June 30th. And this is just one option. There isn't one right answer here, but this is one option. The elapsed time from coordinated entry to housing placement for trans youth of color will decrease by 50%, right? We're just, what it means is the COCA, in this case, is going to take aim at that. And there's a specific amount. You know, what I'm realizing is in terms of our SMARTY goal, and this is my oversight, but it just goes to show you, right? You have to be really paying attention to detail. In a SMARTY goal, we would have a date on there, right? By such and such a date, right? So my bad. But that would be another step in terms of SMARTY goals. You could say the elapsed time from coordinated entry to housing placement for trans youth of color will decrease by 50% in the next year, right? Or by January 1st, 2023, right? You get really specific. Okay, so that's what's due now. And just to kind of show you, kind of put a little bit more context to this of where you would go with that, or where this COC might go with that once they've established that trackable data goal, is they would then assess and understand, they dig deeper into the root causes, basically, and they would work with trans youth and people who specialize in working with trans youth to dig deeply, and they would discover things like trans youth frequently lack identification paperwork, which significantly slows the housing placement process, right? That's a barrier that trans youth in general, including trans youth of color, experience. And then they would develop and implement targeted strategies to remove those barriers. So this is all building off of of this trackable goal and this identification of the disparity that you see in the yellow. They would again collaborate to co-create, as Rajni said before, targeted strategies. So a couple of examples of those targeted strategies: establish new case management procedures for increasing support to trans youth of color around obtaining identification and other needs, right? New case management procedures for increasing support around that. A second option would be establish specific performance measures for reducing the time it takes for trans youth, and it should be trans youth of color, to obtain identification. Okay, and again, you can see I left out of color there in that last one, and it goes to show you really need to be very specific and dig deeply into the specifics so that everybody is clear as you're looking at your performance measurement. Everyone's clear exactly what you're measuring and why you're measuring it and how quickly your progress is happening. So those are just examples. There could be lots of different strategies that are developed, and of course there could be different trackable goals as well. But that's an example of building off of the analysis that you're working on now, which shows you where your disparities are, where your inequities are from population to population. Okay, I'm going to turn it back to, I can't remember, Lamont, is it you on this one?
Yep. So looking at system performance measure number 5, reducing the number of persons who return to homelessness after exiting homelessness to permanent housing. So reducing the number of persons who return to homelessness after they've exited the system to permanent housing. And so you'll establish your universal goal, right? And this is in the form you'll be filling out. This is that overall system performance measure. And so you'll establish that. And so here, say that your community says it's to reduce the returns to homelessness after housing placement by 50%. So that's your universal goal. That's what you want for everyone. Doesn't matter if they're Black, white, Hmong, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, Asian. For everyone, you want that universal goal, right? But then your next step is you're going to assess the performance relative to the universal goal. So when you look at the system performance, the returns to homelessness have only been reduced by 29%. But looking at the racial and social equity piece of this, you're now going to dig deeper and you're going to disaggregate your data to find out, like how we watched the Target Universalism video, how each population is performing to that, right? So you're going to look and see, how are whites performing to that? How are natives? How are blacks? How are Native Hawaiians? How are trans folks? How are women? How are young people? How are older people? How are disabled people, right? You're going to disaggregate for all of those factors. And you might find some really glaring things. You might find some really glaring racial and social disparities. So here, in this example, one that we found out is that Black single adults return to homelessness after exiting homelessness to permanent housing at a rate of 2.8 times higher than their white counterparts, right? So by, like Victor mentioned from Cal ICH, by having a really good racial and social equity goal, that is going to allow you to achieve your overarching system performance measure goal that you've set. It's going to increase your possibility and therefore increase your possibility to the bonus and incentive funding that you get with that. And so the next step, create a trackable data goal based on the disparities identified. And this is what you all are going to be doing. This is what you need to develop. Here in this example, reduce the rate of return to homelessness after permanent housing placement for Black single adults by 75%, right? And that's the section that is due by June 30th. Now, after June 30th, you'll be able to get support from the Racial Equity Action Lab to do the other parts, right? And like John mentioned, that next step, you want to now you need to develop some strategies, right? But in order for you to develop those strategies, you need to bring the people to the table. You need to bring the people most impacted to the table, and all of your different providers and COC leadership, right? All the critical partners to the table, and have a conversation where you assess and understand what's causing these inequities and disparities, right? And the people closest to the problem will give you a lot of information on what's causing those disparities. And that's why we keep repeating, you gotta have your people with lived experience of homelessness at the table, with decision-making and shared power. That's your magic. That's your secret sauce right there, because they know what's happening. They can tell you, right? And when you mix that professional and lived expertise, wow, you need to have both of those together. And so you guys come together and then you find out that as a group, Black single adults experience employment discrimination, which increases the length of time it takes to gain employment or obtain a higher paying job, and thus the length of time it takes to increase income to the level needed to maintain the housing, right? And so now, this has been a major driving force. And so now your community can develop and implement a concrete strategy to remove those barriers and decrease the returns to homelessness, right? And so you all may decide, okay, we're going to do 2 interventions in partnership with community. We're going to increase the length of time Black single adults receive rental assistance after placement into rapid rehousing units and certain other housing types. And we're going to increase investment and employment assistance training provided for this population by agencies rooted in the Black community with high rates of homelessness. And you may also decide, I know the VA is going to be releasing a pilot funding to provide greater legal aid, because they noticed with a lot of our veterans, they got criminal background stuff that's causing a lot of blockages with housing, employment, you name it, right? So now when you lawyer up, you know, and get some of those things taken care of, and so this community may even decide to invest in a legal aid program to support veterans with that criminal justice barrier. So that's just another example. And I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Rajni to share one more example before we open it up to any questions and comments and wisdom that y'all have. Dr. Rajni.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lamont. So here we're looking at an example for system performance measure 6. So when we look here, we've established a universal goal: increase housing placements from street outreach by 30%. To assess our performance relative to the universal goal, we've identified housing placements from street outreach increased by 32%. So here, the section that we are focused on, due by June 30th, co-creating those goals, we have worked to say housing placements from street outreach increased only 5% for Latina, Latino, Latinx individuals, and 7% for Hmong individuals. And so to create a trackable data goal based on those disparities that we have identified, looking at our data again to make sure that we're addressing those gaps, those disparities, we have now articulated our goal saying increase housing placements from street outreach for Latina, Latino, Latinx, and Hmong individuals by 50%. So what you're going to see here, again, is really a focus on the SMARTY, but also that I and E. Inclusivity, we're going back and looking and naming, being specific with the communities that we are really going to work to make sure that we are having impact and addressing systemic issues through our work. We're also going ahead and placing those measurable numbers, right? So we can go back and quantify and see, are we meeting those goals? We have to set those goals and push ourselves and our communities collectively so we can start to increase and advance racial equity. That is really, really important. And so again, that is the section that's going to be due by June 30th. So we want to make sure that those goals are SMARTY focused. And again, the coaches, we're all going to be together to really help with this. And we also want to encourage everybody to, again, make sure we are including people with lived experience and expertise to help guide our processes, to give us those rich insights, to make sure that we are focused in doing this work in an equitable manner as we focus on advancing equity, knowing the interrelationship. And I know we could go on even deeper, but we want to make sure we leave time for good conversation, questions, all of that.
Yes, thank you, Rajni. And also I want to say, we're singing Rajni's praises, but we have so many talented folks on our team. Rajni is actually the president of the National Coalition for the Homeless. And Donald Whitehead, who is also one of our coaches, is actually the executive director. And they actually have a Bring America Home campaign that's a national campaign. So they'll probably put a link in the chat. But, we have to do activism in this work locally, but there's also ways for us to be involved in the movement nationally. So please check out the National Coalition for the Homeless, doing some amazing work. And we have so many of our coaches that are working with your community that are actually a part of the National Coalition of the Homeless, including myself. I'm one of the board members. So I'm kind of big self-promoting, but their work, it's a nonprofit, right? It's for the collective good. So it's okay. So before we get into questions and comments, office hours. This Friday, we had to cancel the last week's office hours, but this office hour is coming up June 3rd, 10 to 11. Now, office hours is completely optional. We know that y'all are busy, so we're trying to have at least 2 office hours a week. You can come in, get your question answered and leave, right? You don't have to stay the whole time. If you can't make the office hours, because we know y'all are busy, we're gonna have a coach that's gonna reach out to your community and see, do you need any specialized assistance? Like Christy, you mentioned, besides interviews with people with lived experience, what tools, strategies do you recommend to assess and understand the drivers of inequity? We have a host of tools, and we're going to be doing a lot exactly on this in phase 2. Now, I think you're Merced County. Were you part of phase 1? So you have priority for phase 2. So there you go. You'll be in there. And for communities that aren't selected to be a part of phase 2, we're planning to provide some support and some other resources and things for you all as well, because we know that after you develop your racial and social equity goals, it's like, now what, right? So besides the phase 2 communities that will be getting intensive support, we are also going to be having a community of practice and support for communities that aren't a part of phase 2, so you also get support, and larger convenings where we all come together. So we're not going to leave you stranded. And I know Cal ICH, they're putting the pressure on you all to do this work. And so they're really wanting to surround you all with lots of support. So Christy, more to come. So that's the office hours. Hope you all can be there. And they're going to be generally every Tuesday and Friday. But we'll send you the workshop recordings. Office hours won't be recorded, but again, touch base with your coach and we can get you what you need. Okay, awesome. Now let's open it up. We want to hear from you all. Any questions, comments, concerns, kudos, criticisms, warm fuzzies, anything?
Lamont.
Yes.
So somebody privately chatted me. They didn't want to ask the question themselves, but they made a really good point, I thought, which was that in their community, the example that I gave under the first one for trans youth and increasing the amount of time or decreasing the amount of time it takes for trans youth to get of color to go through the system, they were saying that in their community, there's such a backlog that this goal almost seems irrelevant because it's taking everyone so long to get through coordinated entry into housing. And what I said in the private chat, but I thought it would be worth sharing with people, is these are just examples. You have to dig down into your own barriers, right? So this isn't meant to be like, oh, pick, just choose this for your community. No, you, as you, Lamont, were describing and Rajni was describing as well, it's really important to dig deeply with the people who know those barriers the best, and then create your own data goal that really resonates with those barriers. So, in the case of this person that raised this question, this particular trackable goal would really maybe not be the best one. So I thought that was just a really interesting insight, that you really have to tailor this to your own community and look at what works for you.
That's some really good insight, John. And whoever asked that question, thank you for lifting that up. And know that you can come to office hours and have some thought partnership around that, right? And also have coaches do some one-on-one thought partnership around that. So please do not hesitate to reach out. We are here for you all. I also want to lift up what Noah said, and then I'm going to go to Jenny next. Jenny, I do see your hand. And Noah said, did the link for Friday office hours already go out? And I'm going to check in with Gina. Gina, do you know if that link went out, or have folks seen the link yet? So I think Amber might be sending that out today.
I believe so, or soon.
Okay. Do you mind if we send a reminder to Amber so folks get that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You should be receiving that from Amber or someone from Cal ICH. They're supposed to be sending all the links. So we'll shoot them a reminder to get that to you all, and to mark it as urgent so you can see it, since tomorrow's Friday. Yikes. Thank you for that, Noah. Jenny.
Hi, thank you. I had a question around around setting strategies in light of fair housing laws, and I think it was on one of the so on this one of the suggested strategies, and I realize this is just an example, was to increase the length of time that Black single adults receive rental assistance. And to me, that seems like a violation of a fair housing law. Like, we're providing a different housing resource based on somebody's race. And you did give the example, I think, in the next bullet, of partnering with agencies rooted in Black communities. And I've heard that suggested before. I think it's a really good concrete suggestion. But in all the kind of equity webinars that I've been to in the last 2 years, and I know we've all been to just dozens, I feel like I just don't feel like I have a lot to grab onto aside from, people with lived experience and partnering with agencies rooted in, specific communities. And I don't know if you have, additional suggestions or thoughts about navigating fair housing laws. I mean, would that first bullet point be, would that actually sort of mean, increasing everyone's length of time receiving rental assistance, so that you're capturing a community that needs more than others? So anyway, I know there's a bunch of questions all at once.
No, those are excellent questions, Jenny. And we have some communities that are considering certain factors. For example, in Chicago, they modified their VI SPDAT, which is that vulnerability assessment, that prioritizes for limited housing resources. Austin, Seattle, King County, and a host of other communities now consider race-based discrimination into that factorization, right? And so there's a way that you can do that allows greater length of time in the rapid rehousing based on certain vulnerability factors. So you're absolutely right. We can't just blanket say, because you are white or because you are Black or because you are Native Hawaiian, you get a longer stay in housing based on someone else, right? It has to be because of some identified barrier or vulnerability that those folks are assessed, because not all Black people may be impacted by discrimination and structural racism in the same way that other Blacks may. Not all Hispanic or Chicano or Latina, Latinx folks may be experiencing the same type of barriers, right? And some may. And so that's the type of implementation support that we could help you with when you're getting to building out your interventions. Do you have any follow-up to that, Jenny? I know I didn't really answer your question other than to say.
No, that's helpful. I mean,
Yeah.
It's reassuring that there's more support coming, because I know this is sort of like the next phase.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess another follow-up question I would have is, it seems to me that, these goals, they're really goals around the performance of our system. But, and maybe this is just more of a comment, but they really don't do anything about the drivers into our system. And I mean, I love that we are all doing this and being forced to do this, because I think it's necessary, and I think it's going to lead to improvements within the work that we do. But what about the work that we don't do, that others do, and that really drive folks into homelessness? You mentioned the workplace discrimination, and we see, of course, inequity in a lot of systems that are big drivers, in kind of upstream that force folks into homelessness. And I don't know if you have thoughts about like partnering with those systems, and where is that piece? Because that feels like a really big missing piece here to actually make big change.
No, Jenny, you hit the nail on the head, right? We know, and you all know this so deeply, that the homelessness system is the dumping ground for multi-system failure. The educational system, the healthcare system, the behavioral health system, the criminal legal system, the human and social services system. People have fallen through the cracks. And so part of what HUD was thinking when people designed their COC was that you would have these different cross-sector, cross-system leaders, and people with lived experience together at the table. Representatives of your criminal legal system and child welfare system and behavioral health system, and people with lived experience of homelessness, and providers, and all the major key players, right? And so a part of our work is building that cross-sector relationship and accountability, right? And so we'll talk about that too, in a part of the implementation strategy on how we as the homelessness system, as leaders, have to partner. And there's some really great examples of communities doing some great cross-sector partnership. But Jenny, you absolutely hit the nail on the head. Without cross-sector partnership, we cannot do this alone.
Can I just add to that, Lamont, from my experience in Seattle and King County, that there's an amazing ripple effect that can happen where when one organization, whether or group or network of organizations, whether it's the COC or whatever, takes responsibility for really delving deeply into identifying inequities, gathering the people most affected by those inequities and changing course, you'll see it start to ripple through. And we saw this, Lamont and I, in King County, the criminal justice system. And you see it rippling through the healthcare system, right? In healthcare, where I started out, you know, there's always this sort of talk about the social determinants of health, like going back to what are some of the root causes. And people say, well, it really doesn't matter what happens in the clinics and the hospitals because all of these outcomes are sort of foreordained. Well, but that doesn't take into account that people who are, there's data, hard data to show that people who are Black are denied certain pain medications at a much higher rate in hospitals than people who are white. And they are, you know, have a much lower diagnosis for certain chronic diseases where things aren't caught as quickly and so forth. So until we sort of look inward and start to really ask ourselves hard questions, then it's hard to have that ripple effect to start. So you know, I think it's both and, frankly, you know, it is both looking inwardly and working together with others. I also want to just point out, Lamont, I don't know if it's a question for Emily, but there's a question, and maybe I just missed it, but there was a question that Richmond brought up about only having zeros in a certain in certain data that they got, their baseline data. Did we answer that already?
Yeah, no, there's several that we're going through answering down, John. Richmond, we're going to have someone reach out to you regarding that because it seems like that might be an error if you don't have any baseline numbers. Do you mind putting your email in the chat? And Gina is going to note that, and we'll touch base with you and Cal ICH to find out what that error is. So if you could please put your email in the chat, Richmond, we will get right on that helping you. Also,
Lamont, I think Deborah had the same question as Richmond as well.
Okay, Deborah, please put your email in the chat and our team will note that, and then we will check and find that out for you. Also, for the office hours, they're available not only for phase 1, they're available for all 110 of you. So all of you, the office hours, you have access to that.
And Lamont, I wanted to get some clarification from Richmond and Deborah on that question. Were you saying that you have no baseline data for underserved populations, so like by demographic subpopulation, or are you saying you have no baseline data for the goal in general?
This is Deborah. There's no baseline data for the street outreach, and it's due to the way that the data was reported.
Okay.
HMIS.
Yeah, so in addition to providing your email here, it's really helpful for us to get it sent through our HAP inbox as well, because it makes it really easy for us to forward it on to ABT, for example, especially if you can like screenshot the section you're seeing, so then we know we're all on the same page about what data we're discussing, then we can follow up with you.
Nice. Also, there was another question and I just missed it. Is there another, Dr. Rajni?
Yeah, I just was going to share, I think Ben had asked a good question earlier about what communities are able to access the coaching sessions. Is it just communities in phase 1? And just wanted to clarify, all communities, right, are welcome to those coaching sessions. So, you know, everybody is welcome to come. That was a great question. Thank you.
Yes, everyone is welcome. Now, we are already 1 minute past the hour. Thank you also, Robert Ward, I believe from Humboldt County, for putting in a resource about how to do racial equity and not violate any fair housing laws. So we'll take a in-depth look at that. But thank you, Robert, for sending that. All right, we are at time. Does anyone have any burning questions or closing comments for the good of the order? Sorry, we are past time. Any burning questions or anything for the good of the order? And Gina, do you mind putting our Racial Equity Action Lab email? So if folks have some burning thing that they need us to troubleshoot, email us and we will be right back with you to find out and help you troubleshoot that. All right.
The office hours tomorrow morning, that someone had a question about the office hours. I have down 10 to 11 on Pacific time.
Yes, that is correct. 10 to 11 Pacific time. And we'll make sure the recording gets out to you. We'll send a reminder to Amber about the recording and about the invite. And that was our fault on the delay in getting the recording to Cal ICH. So we take responsibility for that, but you'll get the recording much quicker the next time. When Nastasia goes on vacation to Jamaica, everything falls apart. While you all have been so wonderful. Yes, thank you, Lori. Happy Pride Month to all our LGBTQ brothers and sisters and non-gender binary and trans folks. We love you. I'm a part of the rainbow family, so I send a special love. Awesome. Well, have a great weekend, everyone. And like I said, this recording will be available and we will linger on for 5 minutes before we transition to our next meeting. So if any of you have any burning questions, feel free to linger on for about 5 minutes. Now we will stop the recording.